What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Warlock, which just had a big gameplay reveal at Gamescom not too long ago, but I wanted to look at this for two reasons. One, I'm interested in the game, but also, in addition to that gameplay reveal, about a week and a half ago, I was present at a hands-off remote presentation where they showed us this gameplay, but also I had the opportunity to ask some questions and things. And so, in addition to talking about the gameplay reveal itself, I also wanted to share some of that with you guys and provide a little bit of insight, at least, into the rest of what we saw here with this new look at this title. But Warlock is especially interesting to me for one main reason, and if you watch the channel perhaps way too much, you might actually know what that is. I'm pretty neutral about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition overall. I don't hate it or anything. It's obviously very popular for a reason, but I have preferred rule sets, let's say. However, there is one thing I love about 5th edition, and that is what they did with the Warlock. And so a game that centers around a Warlock and thus can really dig into their relationship with their patron and everything, sign me up. I'm game. However, we do need to put one kind of big asterisk in there, and that is that this game is an action adventure. If you are expecting an RPG, you're probably going to be disappointed because that is not what they are making. This game is an open world action adventure. It is due out in 2027, and everything we're looking at here is an alpha build. So, one of the first, I would say, primary questions that we would probably have when talking about a Warlock specifically in this setting is answered right at the start of the trailer. Who is their patron? Your patron is none other than Tasha, which might sound familiar because Tasha's hideous laughter and a variety of other spells and a whole bunch of other stuff beyond that. But given the way that she is often presented via things like spells, etc., you would probably be forgiven for not actually knowing who Tasha is, but other than being one of the setting's premier spellcasters, hence all the spells named after her, she also just happens to be an archfey, as I recall, which means our Warlock here seems to be an archfey Warlock with some powers that are unique to Tasha. One in particular that I was able to ask the devs about during that presentation was that Tasha being your patron is going to allow you to customize your spells in ways that wouldn't otherwise be possible. I assume, though I don't know that this for a fact, that might also be why we see this Warlock casting significantly more spells than their spell slots would typically allow for, though to be completely honest, with this being an action adventure in particular, I would not really care if they decided to stretch the rules there a bit, but somebody's going to mention it, I'm sure. Now, it looks like that Tasha is sending our character, Katri, out into the world to look for raw magic in order to facilitate her own goals. That's the nature of their patron-warlock relationship, which seems interesting enough, though we don't have full details on the story breakdown just yet. Moving on a little bit, this gameplay trailer shows us moving through a variety of areas. Now, twice in particular, they talk about these mists that have been kind of moving into the area. Now, those mists might be a little more interesting than they initially sound because the Steam page mentions that the game is set in the Darkhan region. That's important because that is a region of Ravenloft, which appears to be the setting for this one. And the Mists of Darkhan in particular, kind of just the region as a whole, is known for erasing the memory of people who stay there for too long. Though we're talking more than a month. If you hang out that long, just kind of the nature of the realm will erase your memory and replace it with a memory of you belonging to this place. And while that fades if you leave, it also makes you not want to leave, so that never really happens naturally. Just an interesting little tidbit of where this is supposed to be set. And what we are looking at is actually a mid-game portion of the open world, though they are certainly moving through some areas at a pretty brisk pace and trying to showcase a lot of stuff that I'm sure is probably scripted at that because of the nature of the alpha, but a lot of what we actually see there gameplay-wise in particular is about weaving the spells together to do interesting things with. This was also something that got brought up during the presentation, but the spells that they wanted to give us access to were all spells that they could have utilized in multiple different ways, meaning for instance, we see the tentacles in play a couple different portions of this gameplay reveal. One point you're sprouting them from a wall to hold up a platform for you to jump across, and then towards the end of the demo when you're fighting the big bad, you can use those same tentacles to root the enemy in place. So again, multiple uses for the same spell. We see a little bit of that with a variety of others, a lot of movement abilities, both pushing the enemy, but also moving you specifically if you want, the ability to stop time, etc. Now, we are also accompanied by an imp who appears to be our familiar, which I thought was a nice touch, but where I thought it was really interesting in particular was when we started combining all of these different effects. So in addition to being able to use the spells in different ways, it does look like they're also planning on the ability to, again, kind of bounce them off of each other, so to speak, combining them into new things. For instance, at one part, we see Khatri cast what appears to be a ritual spell to make it rain, followed up by using some lightning abilities to make use of that rain to deal some extra damage to the enemies she is fighting. So again, a lot of combinations there. And then a little later on, we do actually see her using her weapon as well, which is pretty standard for warlocks, though depending on what the spell slot situation actually winds up being, I suppose we will see how that pans out, because one of the reasons you want a warlock with an actual weapon is that they tend to not have a ton of spell slots to use, and so you kind of want something to back that up. But if they have actually done something with the spell slots, I could see a situation where you don't necessarily need that weapon nearly as often. Either way, though, we also got a look at a handful of enemies that they had in place, a lot of undead, and the beholder that was there that we only narrowly escaped. She doesn't even try to really fight the beholder. And then towards the end, you're fighting what appear to be like some undead corrupted types before fighting off a big ogre that looks much the same. And all of that seems pretty cool, but I do have a few reservations, let's say. So we know this is an action adventure, which means the combat is probably going to be very hack and slashy with the addition of the spells, and a lot of the open world, I would imagine, is going to lean on these spells as well for some basic puzzle and problem solving as you combine and mix and match all of that different stuff. And so for me at least, I think what is probably going to make or break this title is the story itself, followed up by just how many combinations and how engaging it is to actually use all of these different spells and abilities, as that does seem to primarily be the driving force here. I believe there's not going to be any companions or anything like that, so it's just going to be our character. And while the jury's still out on the quality of things like side content, a lot of that again just looks to be exploration based from this gameplay reveal, and how good that exploration is, and thus how interesting it is to use the spells to do that exploration, is kind of going to be the make or break point for me personally, I would say. But it is always possible, mind you, that they have really good side quests or things like that, but that just, of course, was beyond the scope of what they displayed here, so it's hard to really say. But that is just about all I've got to say about this initial gameplay reveal, and a couple of extra details thrown in there. But more than anything, I think this looks pretty cool. I'm definitely going to be playing this. It has again, projected release date of 2027. No word on dates or anything, a little early for all of that, but I'll definitely be reviewing this one when it drops. And my hope is, given that it's centered around a warlock, that it is actually something worth playing. But that is going to do it for today. I'd love to know what you guys think about this one down in the comments section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.